Hey, I'm Colin Walker here with DCTV for DevCentral. We're at another Guru event here. As you can tell, we've got some folks to chat. And today we're here to talk about F5 migrations, namely migrating to F5 technology from wherever else you've been. So today with me, I've got a couple of folks here. Jason Rom. How you doing, Jason?
Doing well, thank you.
Awesome. And we have Joel Moses as well, who's a senior PME with us. Everyone knows Jason, right? And then we have Nathan McMahon. How you doing, Nathan?
Mostly exceptional.
Mostly exceptional. Who's you're one of our senior SA type people, right? Awesome. And on the chat, we actually have some F5 help as well. We have Josh Michaels, who you'll see in there. He's actually running the chat and doing the relay between the chat and the panel. Speaking of which, if you want to ask a question in the chat, if you have the @ sign and then panel and then your question, it'll let us know to look for that question in particular, and you can ask us directly. And then we also have Rob Eberhardt, who's an SA with F5. We have John Allum, who's one of our FSCs, and we have Byron, I think McKnight, Byron, who's one of our services folks helping us out. So there's lots of F5 resources in the chat as well as on the panel if you have questions. The way this kind of works is, the idea is we get up here, we get in front of a camera, and then we talk about a subject for a little bit. Today it's migration to F5, and then we're going to answer a bunch of questions. So everyone that's out there in the chat, now is your time to start asking those questions, get things primed. Josh will start loading those in, and then we're going to have almost a full hour to sit and try and answer questions about what it takes to get working on F5 technology, what issues you might run into trying to migrate, information you might need to get that done, et cetera, right? All right, and the reason we have these people chosen, this is not by chance. These people here, and I'm just the talking head, these folks are the guys that have the actual experience. So both Jason and Joel were customers of F5, right, before coming to F5.
Right, yep.
So you guys have experience, real world, migrating to F5 technology, right?
Yes. Twice, for me. Yeah.
Twice. And then Nathan, being an SE for a long time and now one of our SAs, you've helped hundreds and hundreds of customers make that migration, right? A few, one or two. So the idea is we collected folks that actually know this stuff. This isn't just conjecture and talk. So really we'd like to start talking about the kinds of things that you might run into. So who has a war story or tale from back in the day about what kind of things did you run into trying to get on F5 technology? Was it a political issue you ran into, or were there technical gaps as far as getting from an old technology to a newer ADC type technology, or what kind of things did you guys experience?
Well, I'll kick off. Political issues really were extending from load balancing to application delivery.
Which is huge.
Because when you have network and application silos, you end up with territories. And sometimes the managers of those territories don't exactly like to work together. And so political issues is network, you be network, will be application, and don't cross the fence. So those were some of the political issues we struggled with. From a migration perspective, the biggest problem that we experienced was going from, at the time in one environment we were replacing Cisco Local Director, and which is a load balancer, and it's doing TCP port switching, and that's really it.
Sure.
Going to a full proxy, and so we had highly tuned web servers behind the local director, and so when we flipped over to the F5 with the default TCP, the app performance went south,
which is not what you expect, right?
No, and so immediately it was, this F5 gear is terrible,
right.
And it was really an implementation misunderstanding, and that with full proxy, you're terminating the connection between client and server now, and so you really need to understand that TCP connection, and so we tuned the profiles like they were on the web servers, and made another couple enhancements, and ended up with better performance than we were before. Just from an app response. There were other enhancements we made down the road, but that was one of the early big issues that we hit.
But it's important because it's the kind of thing where, if you're not used to using technology like F5s, which, let's be honest, it's pretty rare. I mean, there's not many things that are like what we're doing out there. If you're not used to that, you expect one thing, and when the whole world changes and gets turned on its ear, the performance, the functionality, the feel of things, it is going to be different, right? And if you aren't expecting that, it can catch you off guard. So that's one of the things to be prepared for sure, right?
Absolutely.
So what else? Anybody else who's got a story from whether it's a customer or your own experience or?
Well, I've got one. As a customer, we were looking at simplifying our topology in the DMZ. So we had a lot of servers that were accessible through an ISA cluster,
sure,
Microsoft ISA cluster. And of course, ISA was being load balanced in front by an F5 LTM, right? So in looking at the LTM feature set, we realized very quickly that what we were doing with the proxies was essentially no different than we could accomplish at the LTM, pointed directly at the servers.
Okay.
So we decided to remove the ISA tier,
Mm-hmm.
right, and simply let LTM handle that. What Jason was saying about the political battle. You have a firewall type device and an F5 device.
Yeah.
And an F5 makes a wonderful firewall. I mean, until you configure VIPs on an F5, it doesn't pass any traffic.
Yeah,
It's a
default deny, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a default deny device. So when making the case for removing the ISA proxies, we had to take certain things into account and kind of bridge between the network guys and the security guys and make sure that everybody understood the benefits of switching from one gateway scenario with two different gateways to one single gateway.
Why you would do it, what's involved, what you get out of it, that kind of thing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. That issue with, and we call it DevOps is the term we use a lot, right? The whole DevOps thing where you have to kind of work to combine the network folks and the application folks into this kind of single group that really is focused on the application. That's a thing that, both of you as customers have dealt with. Did you hear that from customers that you've been dealing with as well out in the field, whether they have that struggle too, trying to figure out how to cross that bridge? Or
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's always a bit of a paradigm. And on the sales side of the house, one of the PowerPoint presentation slides I have is the Rock'em Sock'em robots.
Yeah, I've seen that
It's
one,
perfect.
actually. I've seen that.
The network guys on one side and the app guys or the security guys, and it's understanding where we fit is that we do bridge the network, the applications, and the security. And it's a little bit of a different paradigm, and that's always an interesting question that comes up as well. Who should manage and who should own
Exactly.
this? And our opinion is that we really think that this is application delivery should be owned by the application owners, but as well as the network team as well. They're all in the same boat. They're all trying to accomplish the same task. They just have different tools. This is one tool, though, that they both can leverage.
Yeah, it's one of those things that we've talked about a bunch of times over the years, but it really is trying to get to this point where you're combining the interests of both groups, really to ignore the interests of the group and look at the interest of the user of the application, of what's best for the us rather than the me, right? And it's one of those things, actually a tagline I've used in multiple articles and that kind of thing, that's using the power of the network to better applications everywhere, right? And that's really what you're doing with these devices, right? So that's some struggles that you've had. What other kind of things, you were both customers, what was the impetus for moving from whatever you were on? I don't really care about that as much, but to F5, what made you make that choice? There had to be some reason you were doing it. What came up to the point where it was valuable enough that you decided to make that move?
Sure. So we did a bake off. We were going from an end-of-line product, and we had to go somewhere. And so, we brought in our current vendor and
right.
several other vendors, and started looking at everything, and everything from management, performance, instrumentation, the ability for our ops guys to troubleshoot things. And one of the problems on some of the other platforms that we looked at was it was really difficult. It was somewhat easy to set things up, but once it was set up and working, if it broke, it was nearly impossible to troubleshoot what was going on. Yeah, but we found with our F5 trials that the instrumentation on the box is so good that we could very quickly come to a root cause resolution. One of the other things is good, especially in a big enterprise environment, when you're needing to get packet captures and finding out where the traffic is actually going. On the other boxes, it just wasn't possible. And so
Which is weird to me.
We would have to rely on our networking switching infrastructure and RSpans and our GigaView box to map everything to try and find, okay, here's the packet, now the packet's over here, and
sounds like lots of fun. Let's do more of
yeah,
that.
and with the F5 box, SSL dump, TCP dump, they're built in, and it just worked, and it was fabulous.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I realize how spoiled I've been. My background is not networking. My background is programming. Right? I was a software engineer before I came here, and so the idea of having to chase packets around a network is, mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was the impetus?
From my perspective, it was reduction of complexity,
Which is huge, right? It's very, very important.
Exactly.
As your network gets bigger.
The more components you have in the network, the tougher it is to troubleshoot,
Of course.
track, etc. Just what Jason
And
was
maintain
saying.
it, right?
And maintain.
Yeah.
And of course, reduction of the total cost of owning the equipment and operating the equipment.
Yeah.
In some cases, the decision was made because one of the tiers wasn't performing better than the tier behind it. LTM is a great example of that, where you have a screen firewall in front of your DMZ located LTM.
Right.
And the LTM is an extremely capable proxy device, right? It can handle a boatload of sessions. And if you put a screen firewall in front of it, you're kind of at the mercy of the connection table on that firewall, right? So if you fill the connection table on that firewall, you could have a wonderful, Viprion sitting back there waiting for sessions,
yeah, absolutely.
but it's not going to get to it through the screen firewall.
Any one bottleneck, right?
Exactly. So collapsing that, reducing the complexity, and choosing basically the best component to do the job. That's what it boils down to.
Yeah.
And initially we were our first line of business was to replace functionality. We need to be at or better, but we're really just looking at making the app like it is on the new gear that's supported, whatever gear that was.
Well, it's an interesting thing that happens. I mean, the end-of-life gear thing, it happens. The industry, that will continue to repeat itself over and over. And while that's okay for a little while, it becomes untenable after a certain amount of time. If you're a enterprise company, you want to be on supported, functioning, developed gear, right? I mean, so
and one of the big things in moving from A to B was we got so much more robust monitoring that we were actually able to capture an actual app failure instead of just a TCP service still responding, but the app not available. And on our other platforms, it was ping, UDP, ping, or echo, TCP, handshake, and that was it. And there was no complexity beyond that. And so when we got into our more complex apps, being able to monitor them in a way that's native to the way the app functions was very powerful.
Well, it really is an interesting, that comment right there, just the monitoring thing. Again, spoiled, forget you've done. I keep forgetting that F5 was my first networking company, right? Networking, we're not really networking, but it's mind-boggling to me that a device would not be able to understand the application. That we don't do just ICMP or UDP monitoring and say, oh yeah, the server's up, because that doesn't really tell you anything. I mean, it tells you the server's up, but who cares?
Well, and you're an app guy anyway. You just write the code, throw it over the fence, and I don't really care if it works. I got it done. So.
Well, I did. I don't anymore, but I did for years. I fully copped that. I was that guy sitting in a change control meeting going, come on, what's the problem? Let's just make it work. It worked in my dev box. It's fine, right?
Right.
So.
And one of the things we spent a lot of time in pursuit of was flexibility, right? So a lot of times you'll have situations politically where you've got the app team, you've got the networking team, or even down deeper than that, you've got the server team and the app team, and they don't really talk to each other,
and don't really like each other.
And so you've got a situation where you need to very quickly put in a redirection, right? And you could do that by rewriting the application, or you could go and configure the web server to do that redirection. But you can't coordinate those two.
You want to do one or the other, not both.
But in front of the application and server, you've got this wonderfully flexible layer that you can utilize to do that, independent of those two teams, and you can do it very quickly.
And you're not doing it on multiple boxes, right? You're doing it one place that works for all.
One box. Right. You don't have to make sure that all your changes are in sync across it.
Yeah.
And one of the customers that I had a year ago, at the time they were just evaluating, taking a look, kicking tires with the big IP, and wanted to see what it was all about. They were using something else. And they had put the big IP in front of their WebSphere services, and just to try it out in the lab to see what was going on. And the application people freaked out, and they said, "Oh, this is causing all sorts of havoc." Because look at the CPU spike on my servers. My servers are now kicking up upwards of 95% CPU utilization, and so we do a little bit more investigation. What's happening? Well, what had it been before? Well, about 75 to 80%. And the answer is, have you ever seen it ever go above that? And the answer was no. That was the max that the servers could push. And the issue, what it turned out to be, if you can call it an issue, is that we utilize OneConnect, and OneConnect allows us to do HTTP request load balancing. So in this case, we open up a TCP socket, push all the requests over that open socket. And what they had problems with before is that they couldn't process enough TCP connections fast enough. The application server is sitting idle because it's waiting on a lower layer stack that they really the application team had no concept that was an issue. This is just as fast as my server can go. So when we looked at the efficiency and utilization of the server, they found that same server that they're paying for, that same license, that same hardware, they're now getting greater than 25% better utilization out of it. So they found they were able to reduce, this turned out to be in the neighborhood of about 400 servers they were able to no longer need 400 licenses, etc. So at first the application team had been freaking out, and now the business owners are going,
It's the best
That's
thing
a
ever.
lot of money.
Great
That's a
idea.
whole lot of money we're saving.
Well, and you talk about deployments that size, and it starts adding up really, really fast. It doesn't take much. You talk about 5%, 10% increase in efficiency and throughput and those sorts of things. And when you're talking about, I mean, if that was 25%, it's a 1,600 server farm, right?
And that's just the one app tier.
yeah.
And this is a web monster, yes.
Of course. But still, pretty soon these things really, really matter,
Yeah.
right?
You talk about the flexibility with WebSphere. We had another internal environment that we ended up replacing with F5, and they had the Apache plugin for WebSphere running on the web tier, and then the app tier behind that.
As you do.
And the problem was WebSphere stopped supporting that plugin, but we had nowhere to go, and so they had to either completely redesign the architecture, or they were stuck on patching of the OS, patching Apache, patching the the WebSphere in the back, and they were stuck. And they were stuck for months, and they had nowhere to go. And so we started digging into the problem a little bit, and it's like, oh, well, we can manage everything that plugin is doing right on the F5 in an iRule.
Yeah.
And so it was maybe a week of talk and packet captures and development, and done. And then it took a little bit more time to get through the proof of concept labs and testing and all that, but it just worked.
I just want to note real quickly for everyone watching and everyone here and everyone in the room, I was not the first person to mention iRules, and that's really shocking. Just so we're clear. Now I can start talking about it all I want. It's great.
Well, and iRules is a big advanced thing, and we can talk about that if we have questions on that. And this is really not about iRules, but that's one of those. That's one of those.
Yes, you're right.
Massively, you talk about flexibility. That's one of those
a game
massively
changer.
flexible things about the F5 platform.
Yeah.
That is just brings so much power into your environment.
Well, briefly, so you've talked about the ways you've seen, why you've seen people change. So for me, I'm kind of the iRules geek. For anyone that doesn't know, I talk about iRules all the time. It's what I do. I go to conferences to talk about it. I have seen so many people make the change because of the flexibility that it offers. Right, there are things that you can do at this tier with iRules that you can't do anywhere else. Well, anywhere else at this tier, and it makes more sense to do here than in the application for lots of reasons. Right. And I've had lots of times where I'll go through and go into a room and they say, "Yeah, we'd love to solve this problem, but we can't." And we talk to all these vendors, and I'm like, "Yeah, we can do that." Mm-hmm. And they're confused at first. They go, "Wait, you can what?" And I go to the whiteboard and start drawing. I'm like, "Yeah, we do it like this." And it's just not a big deal for us, and so it's one of the things I've seen for sure. Yeah. Okay, so before we're about to get into the questions, so if you had to offer one brief piece of advice, or if you could tell somebody that's looking to migrate one thing to put you all on the spot, what would it be? I'll ask this again later, so it's not life or death. If you had one thing to say, hey, make sure that you configure that port right on your VIP, or make sure that you're looking for in this monitor when you go to this tab, or what would it be? Is any one thing to watch out for that you would sticks out? And saying no is an okay answer here.
The first thing that popped into my mind is especially in DMZ environments where security and routing and all that is important, is know what auto last hop does, and. And you might want to disable that in a secure environment where you care where your packets go.
Excellent. What are you, Joel?
Size properly.
Interesting. What do you mean by that?
Well, from your existing environment, if you're going to migrate onto big IP equipment, measure it, right? And measure it in terms of things that you that mean something to your application. How many HTTP sessions are you serving?
Connections, traffic.
Connections per second, right? You can usually produce a pretty good measure of that, and that's going to help you size the correct big IP for your environment.
Yeah, makes sense. And you probably want to size where it's currently at plus X%, right? Because you're going to grow ideally, right?
Always buy more than you need.
Yeah, because it's way easier.
But only so much more, right?
It's way easier to turn more on than to try and forklift more in.
No, not only so much more. Lots more.
Lots more. Whatever.
That's right.
How about you?
Party line.
I find a lot of times people look at when they're replacing older gear and they want to put in some new gear, and they're looking at F5, they look at, I want to be able to do what I was doing before, but I want to be able to do it faster and better. And that's like saying, I've got my 1990s pager and I want to replace it with a newer one. Okay, yes, you can do that, but hit pause for a minute and stop and take a look, because the industry has changed.
Smartphones are good.
Applications have changed. Smartphones have changed. And so the same thing is true in our world when it comes to application delivery. This isn't your grandma's load balancer anymore. It really is advanced and evolved, and it's something that you need to take a look at.
Did your grandma have load balancers?
My grandma
didn't
totally.
have load balancers.
She had a dish of hard
Yeah, they're
candy.
called
Yeah,
kids.
candy, little strawberry ones. That I'm using that line, by the way, the pager thing. That's awesome. Okay, So we're about to jump into questions. So first we want to make sure that there's resources here that you know exist. So we have some links put together that we're going to put in the chat. You can probably see them now on the video if things are all working the way they're supposed to. Don't worry, we will put these up again later, and they'll be in the chat again later. The idea here is that we're going to have different things that you can go to. So we've created some pages that make it theoretically, hopefully, easier to get migrated to F5 if you're looking to do that. So there's a page on DevCentral, has all kinds of information up there about it, some articles, some FAQs, all that kind of stuff, as well as there's a forum for this event. So if you can ask all your questions here now, we'll get to as many as we can. If there are more questions that you have that need answering or that kind of thing, you can put those on DevCentral, and we will monitor that and come back to those questions later, I promise, and we'll answer those online off video, later. And there's also, if you're looking to get deeper into a conversation, you can get a hold of actual engineers at F5, right? We have that link up there where you can get a hold of actual engineers with the F5 team here that can get a hold of you and talk about specific questions and get into deep dives and all that kind of stuff if you want to do that. And we can keep the sales folks out of it. We'll get you to the engineers and ask the technical questions. Is that most of the information up there, I think, right? Awesome. Okay, so we're going to get into questions now. So this is the fun part for me. So if you have questions, again, at panel, dump them in the chat. We'll get to them. So the first question, working on a migration plan for some old LB gear to our new vendor F5. Looking at all the modules, I'm not 100% sure what we need. We're pretty basic, load balancing typically server groups of 30 to 40, and trying to find a better way to do multi-data center LB. One goes dark, one goes live, that kind of thing. Recommendations on things to read or even what modules I might concentrate on. So this one's, I think, pretty straightforward. Who wants to swing?
Well, it sounds to me it's an LTM and GTM use case.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
GTM being the name-based resolver has the ability to look into and monitor LTM and pool resources across data centers and then reply to the user with the best location for them.
DNS load balancing.
DNS load balancing.
Yeah.
Then you can pair that with LTM features, maybe even throw in a little geolocation based on that. And then you can, at the LTM level, target things to the closest data center, right? When the session comes in, you can redirect them to the best data center to serve them. The combination of those two features, LTM and GTM, that sounds basically like what's being asked for.
Yeah, I think so. So where do you go to learn about that? So yes, I completely agree. That's the solution I would recommend. GTM, LTM for locational database or locational data center balancing, and then in data center balancing. So now what? Now if that's what they need, GTM, LTM, where do they go to learn about that? What's the best place to go find information, or who do they call, or what's going on?
Well, at askf5.com, there are the product guides. There's implementation guides for GTM and LTM. DevCentral, we have a lot of articles on implementing that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And in this specific use case of 30 to 40 servers, probably not a whole lot of traffic to 30 to 40 servers.
Yeah.
Might even be good with the virtual edition.
Oh, yeah, it's not a bad idea.
Sure.
Look at the traffic needs, because we do have a virtual edition that runs on VMware now, which could be a great way to get in the door. If you're looking at some of the lower end boxes, even might be a little bit much. That's a great way to start. It's a good call.
I've got to represent the sales side of the house and say, talk to your local system engineer. That's their job. That's what they do, is to help you figure out what that's going to look like.
Yeah, and if you don't know who that is, like I said, in the pages, on the pages that we've linked in the chat and stuff, there's a link to directly get a hold of one of those engineers. You can click the link and chat with an engineer now if you want to. So that's a great way to get in there. Okay, so the next question. I'm not liking working in the GUI. Yeah, you and me both. Kind of slow sometimes, especially when doing 200 repeat actions.
Wow.
Can I script or automate some of this stuff, or is it point and click hell for me?
That drinking bird? You can actually train it to just hit the key repeat.
So, completely derailing off track. I've actually, back when I was in tech support, we had this, 12 years ago, different company, we had this thing where you had to click a button in some stupid application to get the next ticket delivered. And we wanted to get a bunch of tickets all at once and then process them all in bulk rather than trying to, write one and give it that kind of thing. We did a macro that would go up to the right place, click the buttons you needed to do in the right sequence, and then wait, and then do it again, and we would start the macro and go to lunch. Anyway,
So sounds like the lost button.
Yeah,
That's what I had
the
to
lost
think.
code.
GUI issues. This is,
Yeah.
again, I think this one's really straightforward, especially with version 11. Who wants to...
Yeah, if you're looking at scripting and automating, UIs aren't necessarily the right place for that. If you're looking at scripting and automating, there's a couple of paths, but on-box, TMSH. So the command line. From there, you have the ability to build out your scripts and execute the scripts. The nice thing about it is it's pretty intelligent. If it gets halfway through your script and finds that there's an error, it's not going to say, oh, hey, I went through and deleted X, Y, and Z, and I'm about to go and add something, but hey, there's a flaw there, there's a typo, I'm going to exit out. So it's really intelligent. It'll go through and check to make sure that the entire script can operate and has no flaws.
It's transactional, right?
And boom,
Exactly.
have at it. You also have the ability to automate this off box via iControl.
Sure.
So that's another option as well for providing a full automation.
So iControl is our API. So we have a full API on the F5 devices that you can connect to from any system, even itself if you want, and run a script that will go through and tweak the config however you want, right?
Yeah.
The other option here, somebody's got to say it, so I'm going to say it, and you're probably jumping at this too. As of version 11, there's this new thing called IAPS, right? And I know you're a massive IAP guy. You want to take the IAPS angle?
So IAP is essentially a way of bundling together a
It's huge.
TMSH and a GUI
GUI,
config
yeah.
action, so you can create an IAP that will perform those multiple 200 actions
Exactly.
in a bundled sort of way. So you can basically create a template, very menu-driven, and you answer just simple questions.
That you build. You build the questions, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You build the questions, and then you build the actions behind it. So you can basically have one screen that creates all these 200 actions.
Yeah.
And you don't have to go back and recreate everything.
So, for instance, if you have, I don't know what the 200 actions are, so I'm just going to take a swag here. But say I have, 400 members in a pool, and I want to disable 200, upgrade those 200, re-enable those 200, disable the next 200, upgrade, that kind of thing, right? Because I can't think of what else you would do 200 times. But so TMSH is probably the way I would have gone pre V11, right? Write a script, have it do all these things, hit the script, have it go through half the whole bit. But with an IAP, especially if you're doing this every so often, every 3 months, whatever it is for change windows,
Right.
you could write an IAP that has a list of servers, and all you would do is, paste in the list or select the list, or whatever it is, and say, change state. And it would be in the GUI, it would be questions that you have engineered and written in the whole bit, and you would click one button and it would do this whole thing for you. So IAPs are huge that way, right?
Yeah, before we move off of IAPS, Josh and Colin co-wrote an article on F5 fundamentals and just kind of walking through the building of an HTTP service.
Yeah.
And the really cool thing is and from the engineering perspective and certainly in enterprise, you vet anything you do. So an IAP would absolutely have to be vetted. But when you start at the process of building, okay, I need pools, I need profiles, I need VIPs, I need all this.
Monitors,
and once you understand all of that, it's silly to build it all independently.
Every time.
Yes.
Every time. And so we have, you say that you build your own IAPs. Well, we have a bunch of them bundled
Oh, yeah.
in
Tons
the
of
product.
them, yeah.
There are more that you can download at downloads.com or downloads.f5.com, and also at DevCentral we have some community IAPs. And so you have the flexibility of building your own. We have some built in that have been vetted by people who really know what they're doing. And the other benefit of an IAP past building it is that IAP manages all those objects. So in an ops environment where you have 50 people in the kitchen cooking, you can't delete that pool if it belongs to the IAP.
And carrying on that thought, something you said at the beginning, you have to vet things, right? You're always vetting the configuration, vetting the things you're adding, and vetting the IAP. The difference is, once you've vetted the IAP, it's done.
Right.
Every configuration you create with the IAP, if the IAP was built properly, will be done the same way.
Yep.
Will be done correctly, will have the right formatting, the right permissions, the right whatever it is you choose to set in the IAP. Every time you push the button and 200 things happen, the right 200 things are happening.
Right. And you have a view of those 200
which is
things
huge.
consolidated, which is just fabulous for understanding.
If I read between the lines on the question,
Yeah.
it sounds to me like it's great to know how to go in and create a VS and attach a attach a monitor and change the TCP
That's handy.
profile. That's handy because you understand how everything links together.
Yeah.
But built into everything 11 and above, take a look at the HTTP IAP. Right? It can create all that stuff.
Absolutely.
You just fill out one screen, hit OK, and it creates everything for you
Super
and
easy.
links it all together. I think it's the ping-ponging throughout the GUI
Yes.
that kind of scares some people
Yeah.
at that time. Using that IAP, which is just a pre-canned configuration, just select the template, create the application service,
Works
fill in the
great.
name, fill in the IP, and that's basically all you have to do. It links all that stuff in.
Awesome.
I think that it's kind of one of those features we don't really press.
But it's really, really useful.
Yeah.
very
And even if you don't end up using it, when you're getting started, create one with your application. Then you have a consolidated view of how configurations are built, and it's a fabulous learning tool.
Yeah. So IAPS. Okay, next question. Looking at upgrading to a new or larger F5, excellent choice. Where do I get stats or metrics to try to plan that? Which ones are most important? So that's a really good question.
Yes.
Is that something that you've dealt with as far as customers trying to upgrade and stuff? I look at him because I imagine you deal with customers trying to do this in the field, right?
Sure. There's a lot of stats that are relevant. But one of the most important things is, well, when I ask questions about this from customers, we'll get responses back like, so what is the utilization like of your site? And well, we get 1 million page hits a day. That's a little vague. So
Right.
what we want to know is,
That doesn't tell us much,
usually
right?
you see kind of the peaks and valleys in terms of thresholds as to the busy times, not busy times. We want to know what is the worst case scenario at the busiest time. That's the metrics that we're interested in, because that's what we're trying to scale to, is make sure we have headroom to scale X percentage above that. So we're looking at things like, what is the memory utilization, what is the CPU impact at those times, how many connections per second, is the site SSL, is it not SSL? These are all going to be important factors.
Absolutely.
And another one is, this is what you're doing today. Is this what you're wanting to do tomorrow? You want to just do a one-to-one, just take your config and drop it onto a new big IP and go? Or are you also wanting more horsepower to be able to turn on some things like, now I want to add compression, now I want to add function XYZ?
You're back to that pager smartphone thing, right?
Correct.
Where if today you are doing basic load balancing and ICMP monitoring, and tomorrow you want to be doing SSL offloading, a whole bunch of other things that we can do, you need to think about sizing differently, right?
Yeah.
Makes sense.
In my experience, the two that are the most meaningful are HTTP requests per second. So
And you want the
one-
full view of a day, right? Spikes and valleys and the whole bit, right?
You want to
can't-
see what you want
not
to see
the
what
average.
the peak is.
The average is no
Right.
use.
And
right?
I'd say even take peak and go 30% above
Yep.
that, right? Because you got to handle burst load as well, and then also SSL connection setups per second.
Oh yeah,
Okay,
makes sense.
Those two. If your site's SSL, you need to look at both of those, and that'll help you pick the correct F5 platform for you.
Sweet. Okay, so next question. Can you describe the differences between host OS and TMM routing? What takes priority and how are things isolated? Yes, I'm sure we can, and probably could spend an hour doing it. I'm going to take the simple approach, and you guys can add on to that. So the host OS TMM thing, I've written extensively about this. I just went and presented about this recently, so I'm happy to talk about it. But the idea is TMM, which is our traffic management microkernel, is the bit that does all of the smarts in the F5 devices, right? Anything that is traffic passing through the F5 device, it goes through TMM. This is what allows us to do all of our magic. All of the things that we do as far as manipulation and optimization and all of those things happen in TMM, as well as IR rules and like all that stuff happens there. The host OS is just there to basically do management functionality, right? You can SSH to it. You can use the web interface to get to the GUI. It really just supports the base daemons that allow you to connect to the box and manage the box and keeps the lights on, right? So that's the differences. As far as the priority, TMM is 100% priority. So most of the time, if you connect to a F5 device via SSH and do a top, you will see the utilization is through the roof, even if you're not passing much traffic. It's because TMM instantly reserves all of the memory and CPU, and it just says, it's busy, don't try and get to it, right? Other than an X percentage that the host can use, because it is taking priority for the traffic, right? So as far as host priority versus TMM priority, there's no question, it's always TMM. Does that answer that question? What, anything to add?
Except, and this is the problem that I hit from a monitoring perspective.
Oh, yeah,
if
that.
there is a route out the host OS,
Yeah, there's
but
that.
your primary routes out TMM are not available,
Yeah.
you can still be good because of monitoring,
Right.
yet it's down.
Fair
And
enough.
so
So-
I hit that, and that was painful.
Yeah, the simple rule of thumb is by default, the big IP behaves in what's called auto last hop, meaning whatever port it came in on,
It'll go back on.
it's going to turn around and return
Yep.
that traffic over that port. Okay?
Whatever the source MAC was, we'll return it to the source MAC.
Exactly. Now that's for incoming traffic. Now if you have something on the box though, like a monitor,
Yeah.
and it needs to go to something
Because there wasn't
leave.
a source.
Because there wasn't a source.
Yeah.
Then it's going to basically look at the host OS route table and figure out where to send it.
Which is
based on
great,
that.
usually.
Usually.
So on your host OS, when you're adding management routes, and you need routes specifically to your AAA, to your DNS, routes specifically to those don't have default routes. It's not good.
Right. Awesome. Okay, next is from Randy. Says, primarily interested in how configuration looks from the viewpoint of application support personnel, not network personnel. So that's interesting. I've heard this a lot from application personnel, not support personnel. You're nodding your head, so go after it.
Your answer is IAP.
Yes.
Right? So from a network perspective, from a network person, they're going to look at the big IP much like a network device.
Yeah, of course.
I'm creating the VIP. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. And they're assembling this whole
I care about the objects
story.
that allow the traffic to pass and all that stuff, right?
And application support personnel is going to they're going to want to come in and look at everything on a single screen or assess how everything has been built. They're going to want to answer a few questions and click finish, and then it's going to be basically a full configuration build.
Yeah.
And IAP is tuned to do that, right? So instead of ping-ponging through the GUI like we were talking about earlier.
And having to understand what each of those things are called, right? That's a big issue as far as just information and education.
Yep.
If you're an application person, you might not know what the heck I can speak from experience. When I logged in the first, several months I was with F5, I didn't know what the heck I was looking for. I didn't know what a VIP was or a pool, or I didn't know what all that crap was.
Right.
So if you're an application guy, it's even more to obfuscate that, right?
Yeah, now the IAP also has another advantage in that it groups all the config items that it creates into an application. So that when you look at things that are logged, when you look at reports that occur, you can actually receive a report about that application. And the application is a bundle of everything that has been created to support that application. Tools, monitors, etc. And so when you look at it from that perspective, you can take all these config items and have a single view.
Which is massive.
Config. And then you can take the IAP and you can actually allow a certain application support person to view that configuration.
And not the rest.
Right. There are a couple of other tools that are available on the big IP within the GUI. Less about for the configuration side, but more about just the visibility of the health of things.
The support kind of thing.
Yeah, and one of those is going to be, there's just what we call a network map. And that's going to show you just a very simple one-page look at, here's my virtual server, this IP port, that maps to this pool, that contains these servers, members, and here's the health of them, up, down. And so it's another way that you can very quickly see a larger grouping like this and see that mapping.
Which is a newish feature, right?
It's been around for a few years now. But another piece as well is the application visibility and reporting. And this is less about for the configuration side, more about just from an application owner, what's the health of my application? And so this is a way we can see your application on the wire and see what is the page generation time, what is the client latency. So if we have a client that calls in and says, hey, your application's slow, is it the network that's slow? Is it the application that's slow? Let's be able to correlate all this data. The big IP sits right in the middle between the network and the app. We can correlate that data for
quickly
you and show you via AVR.
And even drill down and say, what's the slowest page? Sometimes someone will call in and say the application is slow, and what they really mean is this one particular page
that I happen to be using a lot.
In the application that I'm using a lot is
I use 3 pages. They happen to be the slowest 3 pages. The app is slow. Well, no, it's not. Those pages suck, right?
So that's a very powerful feature.
Absolutely.
That's just critical. If you're in the application world, you've got to play with that.
Yeah. Sweet. And that's AVR, right?
AVR.
Yes.
Okay. Next question from Rebecca Cintron Farlow. How does the configuration of the F5 differ from Cisco CSS or ACE conceptually? In other words, does load balancing work in essentially the same way? Services, server farm, content rules, VIPs, group, NAT. Only interested in load balancing functionality at this time.
So, load balancing functions are commodity.
Right.
A load balancer is a load balancer, and they all work the same.
Or very similarly, right? It's pretty much the same thing.
Yeah. If you're using round robin on XYZ product and ABC, round robin's round robin. The algorithms are all the same. We have some additional algorithms for load balancing that some of the other vendors don't have, or that particular vendor doesn't have.
Right.
But yeah, load balancing is load balancing.
One of the things you'll find is that the naming conventions are very different.
Yeah.
So if you're just looking at that configuration, looking at our configuration, it feels really different. Under the hood, it's actually not that bad, though. You will find that there's some kind of quirkiness with the way that you'd set up SSL processing or some of these other aspects on something like an ACE versus how you do it on the big IP. So on the big IP, the ordering feels a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that once you spend a couple of minutes and really get under the hood and play with that, I think you'll find it flows really, really well.
Yeah, it's really nuanced, right? It's more user experience, like you said, education as far as terminology and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
But really the functionality, if you're talking load balancers, it's really, it is commodity. Load balancing is load balancing. We can do the same things and more. But you can load balance just about any platform. It's going to be very, very similar. And coming from any platform to F5, once you learn the new terms and how the flow works and that kind of stuff, it'll do the same kind of things.
Tomato question.
It really is, yeah. It's personal preference, I suppose, but really it's personal experience, right? If I had spent 26 years doing things one way and came to a new device, it would feel weird. But the reality is the functionality is all there.
Cisco says server farm, we say pool.
Yes, exactly.
I would add to that also that if you're looking at a migration there, we do have tools for that migration. And so that's an important piece.
You're leading here. So 1 second. So that's great for that question. Any other comments on that, real quick? Okay. I say he's leading because the next question from Tim is there a published guide for migrating from ACE to Big IP? So, Nathan.
Yes.
You were just saying there were resources for these things.
That's all I know about that.
Oh crap! So there is a guide out there. I believe we have it linked. I think from the
Yes,
page, right?
There's a link.
So there's a guide out there that will talk about how to get from one place to another. There's actually even a script at this point that John Allen, who is in the chat, I believe, if he's still there, he wrote this script that will help you get started at least, if not all the way. You can take your old configuration, run a script, and it will output it in the new format to get it on an F5 box.
Yeah, and that's true. There's scripts out there for CSS, CSM, Radware, Citrix, a couple different versions.
Yeah, a bunch
of
of
Citrix.
those
So
things.
there's a lot of scripts out there to migrate from other. As far as an official published guide, I don't have that link. So if you have it, I'll get it to me and I'll get it out there.
Yeah.
But if you're talking box to box, the very basics of getting it on the network and all that. That part's not real complicated. The complicated thing is you're moving an application from point A to point B,
And that
and that's
matters,
really
yeah.
hard to publish as a guide because everybody's
Absolutely.
applications are different.
Yeah.
Uh,
Let me
one-
down, man. You let me down. I thought I was serving the softball up, and jeez.
One good thing to do would be to take that script and get a copy of VE, get an eval license.
Absolutely.
Run the conversion script, put it on the VE, right? Put the generated config on the VE and take a look at it.
Yeah.
VE
So,
is the virtual edition, which
Thank you.
is you can just run a trial version on your local laptop if you have VMware running on it.
yeah,
Like that.
and your point's actually a really, really, really good one. That's what I would recommend to almost anyone that's looking to do this. Is get a license, talk to your sales folks. They will get you a temporary license. You can get the virtual edition installed. You can try it, make sure your configuration works, and all of the configs from the VE are they apply directly to the hardware devices, right? So you could do all of the migration work in a VE before you actually pull the plug and make the change, and then put the device in place, and you just copy the file. I mean,
Clean it up.
yeah, it's really straightforward. So
And
that's a
the
good
one
call.
exception there would be licensing.
Well,
So,
of course, yeah. Sorry, you're right.
for the VE.
Okay, so next question from Randy K. Is there a script or a guide to move from Foundry?
I have not seen one.
I haven't
So
seen
to me, there isn't one that exists.
But Foundry, I've not heard.
Seen one.
Not in a long time. I've heard.
Server
people-
iron,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's been a while, right? I know.
Yeah.
So I think Randy, unfortunately, I don't think there is. That's an interesting question. Maybe John wants to write one of those. John's in the chat. He wrote the other one. Harass him. Make him write it. You can tell him I said that, although he probably just listened to it. Yeah, I don't think there is one that exists right now. Something that if it's useful and enough people could use it, we could look into writing one for sure. But I haven't seen one around yet. You guys either? Yeah. All right.
We've done it many a time, but I don't know that there's a script for it.
Right. I know we've made the migration a bunch of times, but yeah. Next from MX Peffer. Yeah, I think that's how it's said. We have F5 with version 10x and SharePoint farms which are load balanced by F5 and do not function properly where any web service is called. I know we can fix it by using version 11, but we can't upgrade, so is there any fix for version 10, or do we have to use NLB clustering? I didn't know there was an issue with version 10 and web services on. Have you heard about this? This is new to me.
This is new to me.
This sounds like it might be a problem with the SharePoint site's alternate access mappings.
Okay.
Okay.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Fire! Yeah.
So sometimes in a load balance scenario, you have to make sure that the website knows what names that it should be called under.
Okay, that makes sense.
And in some cases, the web services are bound to one alternate access mapping,
Sure.
and then the website itself is bound to another. And if you're load balancing for that one AAM, it may not be mapped fully to the
interesting.
web services.
So it's trying to send to a web service, but the web service is basically rejecting it.
Right. Now, I think that may be what's being referred to here.
Okay.
We do have a Microsoft Services forum.
Yeah,
If you post that question in the forum, we'll try and get eyes on that, because that's a problem. I think I've seen similar SharePoint issues in the forums before, and there might be answers already out there, and if there's not, we'll get you answers.
Yeah, so no direct answer that we can think of off the top of our heads, but do ask the question in the forums. There's links to the forums in the chat all over the place. Ask it out there, and we'll get to it. And if we don't, somebody will. The forums on DevCentral are monitored by the people that are responsible for those products and stuff. So the Microsoft forum, the Microsoft guys watching that kind of stuff, right? So next, moving on from Daryl, does F5 sell direct or only through the channel, or both? We're the sales guy. I know the answer to this.
Yes, I'm wearing a button-down shirt, so I must know the answer.
But I'm not going to dirty myself talking about sales stuff, so we'll let you have at that.
F5 sells to the channel, and that's true worldwide. So that's, really, if you've got your local favorite bar or whomever it is you go through, that's really the path for F5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a simple one. So channel is your way to get there, and that's for lots of reasons that we won't get into, but it's worked really well for us so far.
That goes over our pig.
Yeah,
grade.
way over. Next question from user Candon. I'm probably saying it wrong, but whatever. Are there specific white papers that talk about implementing SMPP load balancing? One of the services my company provides is SMS services for the mobile operator community. My goal is to leverage a front-end VIP and move as much application logic north of the server farm, USCS Blade-based VMs, where the applications physically reside. I have Cisco ACE and XML Gateway, but I know XML Gateway has been retired and Cisco currently has no concrete plans for a replacement product line. Any guidance would help me immensely. So to the ground, ready to go.
So two comments on this. Number one, in the service provider space, in the telco space, we do have a lot of capabilities there, and we have forums that where you can ask some of these questions directly. I will say, in terms of SMPP load balancing, you're talking about XML document traffic decisions. We do have the capability of using XML-based content routing. Okay, and I think that's probably the direction that you'd want to head. This is probably going to be built through an XML an XML profile. It's available on 11, and you would basically create it like an XPath map, and then set your pool based on that. So you could actually switch between multiple server pools based on the content of the XML document.
Which would replace both of the pieces of technology they're talking about,
Absolutely.
right? Which is an important point. So not only would it do the XML inspection, but because we are what we are, you have LTM behind it, it does all the load balancing, those things for you, right? The monitoring, all that kind of stuff, right? So yes, it can do it, which you would only need LTM. I think you don't need other modules for that, right? That's just LTM.
That's just LTM.
Yeah, so with just LTM, you could replace both of those pieces of hardware.
I'm not aware of any white papers that talk about that. But
that was the question, wasn't it? Yeah.
I know that there has been some work done on that, and that our XML-based content routing is probably the way that you want to go.
So the answer to the question is get a hold of somebody and convince them to make Joel write the white paper. That's you ever hear that bus come through there?
Every time I'm in the same room with him, I always get more work
yes,
to do.
Yes, always. Yes, absolutely. Yes. Stop being so smart and I'll stop giving you work. Okay, so that answers that tidily. Awesome. Next, Jim Jones says, what controls are available to limit functionality to support personnel via TACX? So the first part of that question I was all ready to answer, so limit functionality via TACX. Help?
Yeah, I actually wrote an article on that.
Awesome.
It was for version 10. I haven't updated for 11. I don't know if it's changed much, but it's pretty straightforward. Whether it's Radius TACX, we support Radius LDAP TACX. I don't know. I think there's another one in there as well.
One out there.
But yeah, totally supported. There's it's in the product documentation on setup as well now.
So what controls are available?
You can use remote auth to lock down by group. So you can send in the the proprietary attributes or whatever for if you're using Cisco ACS or whatever TACX control server. You lock down the by group, and then your default group would be essentially a default deny. Sorry, you can't log on.
Right. So you could break down your support personnel into, these are the sysadmins, these are the whatever the groups are that they want, and give each of those groups individual levels of access to the box, right?
Yeah.
On box, they could be an administrator. They could have
Read-
different levels of
read-only.
correct, read
Yeah.
only, or they are. There's a dozen different roles that you could assign them to.
Not to mention with the whole admin partitions thing, you could assign them to just one partition and those sorts of things too, right? Right. Which is awesome. So there's lots of controls.
You can't customize the roles as defined yet. Hopefully that'll be coming.
Sure.
But they're pretty well spaced out as far as application admin versus overall box admin and operator and guest.
Right.
You just want your C levels to be able
Able
to
to
come in and
see.
look without touching.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, next, again from Rebecca, is there a white paper regarding design or an architecture and sizing guidelines?
On Ask F5, there are, as far as sizing, your best bet is to get in touch with sales engineers that'll be able to help you size, because there's so many factors based on the applications you have that it's really hard to just come up with a default chart for that.
And that really isn't, I agree, so
But
that's my answer too, right?
Yeah, but as far as the actual performance numbers, if you can map what your application does to performance numbers, those are available from sales organizations, but still, you want to talk to somebody to come up with that proper size. As far as the white paper regarding design and architecture, there are good, helpful implementation guides on Ask F5.
Yeah, the reality is, and this isn't, I don't push people off to sales without a good reason. There really is a, sorry man, no I'm not. There really is a good reason for it. You do need the touch. You need somebody to walk through it with you, because, again, this goes back to, I'm going to use this 1,000 times today. I love the analogy, the pager smartphone. It really is that whole thing. Like, okay, you could even go look at your current utilization and map it to the right box and all that kind of stuff, but that only works if you aren't turning new features on, right? And the reality is, it's a very, very, very rare thing to watch people go from anything else to an F5 device and not start going, ooh, what does this do? And turn the features on, because we can do so much cool stuff, right? And so coming from my set of things, which is very much application developer type focused conversations, they ask me that all the time, and my answer is always, always, always to talk to somebody, because the reality is, if you're going to start putting these new features in place and writing iRules to do really cool things and all that kind of stuff, you need to take that into account and get the right size box for what next year is going to look like, or 2 years from now is going to look like, not for today or yesterday, right?
Yeah. I would also add to that, F5 does have a architecture class that's intended to really get into the weeds on some of the how you could deploy and design and some of the nuances of this. And that's the reality, is that there's a lot of different layers of nuances, because not every network is the same and not every application is the same. So trying to marry and match these up is hard to fit into one white paper. So there is a class for that, and there are sizing guides, but we recommend, honestly, talk to an expert.
Can I plug DevCentral forums here?
I suppose.
A lot of times, if you've got an application tier and you have a particular deployment that you want to choose, you can find other customers in the DevCentral forums that are doing exactly what you're doing. And you can ask them what they did. In a lot of cases, they will tell you things about their sizing that maybe even the sales folks don't know, right? Your engineer who comes in and helps you may not even know. But you'll find people out there using, load balancing CA Unison or what have you.
Crazy stuff.
And they can tell you. You use the forums as a resource.
And it's one of the things that we talk about all the time. It's 100,000 plus people out there doing this stuff. You are bound to run into people. You might think your scenario is amazingly unique, and it might be very, very rare. But 100,000 plus people, somebody else out there has done something at least similar, right? If not the same. So good call. Okay. William T. Michael asks, F5 LTM IAP SharePoint 2013 and Link 2013 templates when? It's a great question. I don't have the direct answer to that, unfortunately. It's the kind of thing where they are working on them, and I know that we are going to be implementing those things soon, certainly at least with the SharePoint stuff, probably with Link as well. I know there's been an older, anything that there was an implementation guide for will get IAP-itized, IAP. Let's turn it on IAP.
Appetize?
No, let's not. Let's just not go there. I'm going to not go there. Forget that last 10 seconds. We're going to turn all of those things into IAPs at some point. If they aren't already, they will be. and make sure that you are keeping an eye out for those. As far as the actual date, I have no date. Date? Anybody? Date? Date?
No, I know it's.
Didn't
I
But
know
we
it's
do have a
being
very
actively
tight
worked on.
partnership with Microsoft, and so
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
it's being worked.
It's
Yeah.
in the queue being worked on, but I don't know the date.
Yeah,
We can
and those
find that
things
out.
do take us a while, and it might seem annoying that they do sometimes. But the reality is, the reason they take us a while to build is because we're going through, and we really do go through every possible step and feature with Microsoft, back and forth, and say, "How about this? Is this how you want it? Is this how it works? Is it?" It's really a very detailed,
Yeah.
thorough guide by the time it's done, right? And to take that and turn it into an iApp takes a little more time.
Yeah, just the complexity in what you can configure at the Link front end server.
Yeah, it's huge.
There are dozens of different deployment models, and we
Yeah.
have to support all of them.
And then automate all of those, right? So,
Yes.
yeah. All right. So, again from William, F5 LTM with GTM and UAG 2010. Are there design guides showing the use of UAG behind LTM and GTM with resilience between two geo-distributed DMZs? I see LTM guides, but hard to find GTM as well. Any UAG experience here on the panel? Or information?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
A little bit. I would encourage. I would encourage APM use, of
Sure,
course,
sure.
as a replacement
Shocking.
for UAG, but UAG absolutely can be load balanced behind an LTM, and it sounds like that's what's happening here. He's asking specifically about GTM playing into that.
Right.
I know that is currently being looked at.
Not currently something we do.
I don't think it is something we can do, but I think the best scenario is going to be in the deployment guide for UAG.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm presuming that this question relates to use of UAG for doing like direct access
Right.
tunnel load
I'm sure.
balancing.
Yeah.
It's the most common scenario for UAG, and we just again that's just something that's under development right now.
Okay. Cool.
Watch the forums.
Watch the forums. Keep an eye out. All right. So we are getting close to time here. It's just about 11, right? We're at what, 10:57, something like that. There are lots more questions, which is awesome. I'm really glad that everyone's got questions to ask and is entertained so far in that whole bit. I'm getting messages on this big reader board thing we have that while it is getting close to time, that we do have a little more time, we can keep going. So what we're going to do is we're going to throw up the slide again that shows you the links to all of the stuff and put the links back in chat. And so here's all the resources you can get. You can get to the forums, you can get to the page for migration, you can get to all that stuff, and we'll show you where that is again. But we're going to keep on tracking. Do you guys have more time to keep talking for a little bit?
Sure.
We won't go for another hour or anything, but we'll keep going a little bit over and try and get some more of these questions answered. So keep asking them if you have questions. And again, any questions that you don't get answered on the actual panel, we will take them and put them in the forums, and you should do the same, and we'll try and answer them there as well. So we're going to keep going. You guys good?
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So Jay Mania. What about having a script to go from NetScaler to F5? People are really excited about this script. The idea of we push
Yes.
a button and have it work.
It's out there in the wiki, and it's also linked on the launchpad. For
Yes, that one already
migration.
exists.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And these scripts are take a config and migrate it, and then you will want to test. Going back to the VE idea, I think it's a really, really sharp idea to do the
Yes.
migration script in VE, right? So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the scripts are meant to automate a lot of the workload.
Exactly.
But it is not a 100% push button, because not every feature is quite lines up perfectly. So
Yeah.
it does involve a little user
touch.
intervention. So
Yeah,
expect
absolutely.
that.
Yeah, expect it. But if we get 80% of the work done, that's pretty solid, right?
Yeah, and it's going to be limited to the app delivery sections of the config.
Of course.
It's not the network and all that. I
You
don't
do that yourself.
believe
Yeah.
is included in these
Yeah, yeah.
in the scripts.
All right. Next is from Marlon. Is there a virtual lab available for potential customers to try out the CLI? That is an excellent question. Not a virtual lab. There's a virtual edition. So we just talked about that earlier. We do not have a virtual lab that you can log into remotely and get to a cluster of F5 devices or whatever. We don't do that for security reasons and lots of stuff. What you can do is go download the VE, and there's a VE trial. That is an older version, it's 10.1, but you can also go get the VE lab license or whatever, and you can get a temporary license from your salespeople, and you can install that on your laptop or your server or whatever it is, your VMware cluster if you already have one. and then try out the CLI right there. The CLI has been changed a bunch over the years. We now use TMSH, which is just this thing that is good for automation and all that kind of stuff. It's a custom shell that we use. So I do recommend giving it a shot and trying it out because it does feel different. Once you get used to it, it's actually pretty effective, though. So
I can almost guarantee you that your sales engineer is going to have a copy of VE running on his laptop that he brings with him to your office.
I will go ahead and guarantee it. I will go ahead
So
and
all you have
guarantee
to do is just ask them to show it to you.
it. Yeah, very, very straightforward stuff. All right.
We should have a virtual lab though.
We've talked about it.
We should just do that.
We talked about it, and it's one of those things that we go back and forth about, right? Especially as DevCentral, we talk about this whole, it would be cool to be able to display, hey, try this iRoll and all that kind of stuff, and maybe we'll get there someday, right? It's something we've thrown around a lot, but there's been some drawbacks to it and some reasons we don't, but for now, the solution is VE. In the future, maybe we'll get a lab, right? So Marlon's, no, that's the Marlon's last one. So Jim Jones says, what does the web acceleration module do versus LTM? Oh, man. How much time do you have, Jim?
I think you can still. All right, I'll take a first stab at that.
Okay.
LTM does acceleration. It is a high-performance device. The accelerations that it does are going to be TCP-based accelerations for any TCP protocol. It will also do for HTTP accelerations for HTTP compression and HTTP caching of static objects. So out of the box, it's going to do some of these basic accelerations.
Sure.
Web acceleration is getting into a lot of the more advanced and some of the thornier issues about trying to provide additional levels of acceleration. So we're talking about dynamic content and caching for this. We're talking about being able to do things like open up multiple TCP sockets or connections so that you can be pulling more objects in parallel and being able to do this transparent to the application. Right. Things like image optimization. So if you've got this ginormous, beautiful, big image that you're shoving down to a client, that's great, but I'm using an iPhone. I need an image that's about that big.
Yeah.
Be able to do the image optimization on the fly, store that locally in our cache, push that down. And so someone who has a mobile, you're looking to make this be a mobile application strategy, takes care of that for you. JavaScript minification. There's a lot of other features there for, really as you start getting beyond just the basics, that's when you'll get this far with LTM. If you want to get beyond that, there's an endless list of features that it's providing, but those are an example of a few of them.
Yeah, and a couple. So we just did a bunch of wall work on DevCentral. One of the things that I didn't really fully understand before, but I do now, thanks to some of our awesome WA folks internally, is that it's not just about higher performance. So Web Accelerator is great for increasing performance. It does that very well. LTM is also good at increasing performance in some of the ways. There's some features that WA does that LTM doesn't. One of the things that WA does that's really, really valuable that I didn't really realize was a differentiator was that it provides consistency. So think of, if LTM is, it's the race car and it's getting you there and it's acceleration. Well, WA is, the same race car but even faster, but it's also, luxury at the same time. It's the consistent ride. It's understanding that every time I go to one of these pages, it's going to load in a very similar manner, very similar timing, because of some of the really advanced things it can do with header manipulation and really long cache durations for static or for possibly dynamic objects, that it then can go do checks against the back end to see if those objects have changed without allowing the client to go through.
Yeah.
So rather than the client having to go ask the server, did this change, did this change, did this change, the WA can talk to the client and say, just stop asking. It's going to be that way for 180 days, whatever it is. And then the WA in the back goes and says, hey, has this changed? And when it does, it will then tell the client on the next request, oh, hey, by the way, this changed. Dump your cache. Here's the new one. And that kind of thing provides consistency, because you could do some of that caching from LTM, but if you did, you couldn't have the cache duration that long. There's no way, because then you wouldn't have objects that would ever update. And your shorter cache duration means that maybe for the next 4 hours and the next 24 hours, wherever it is, the experience is fast and accelerated, but then the next time the user comes to the site, 36 hours later, it's slow again because it has to go through all the objects in that whole bit. Whereas with WA, you don't have to go through that.
Yeah.
Right.
A lot of times you'll hear with CDNs talk about how we'll bring the content as close to the user. Closer to the user. With Web Accelerator, so yes, it will push that to the user, but then we'll tell the user to quit re-requesting this object. Logo.gif has not changed, even though it's an SSL encrypted site. It still hasn't changed. Mm-hmm. If it does, we will tell you.
Exactly.
So our concept is push it all the way down to the user, and so they're not doing those repeated round trips.
Well, I think it's something that a lot of folks might not realize happens, right? Is that I assumed for years that, cached content is cached content. It's not really true. Your cached content, your browser most times is still going to, every so often, and it depends on the timeout of the cache, the headers, the cache control headers, is still going to go ask the server, has this cached content changed? Do I need to re-download? And those round trips, even though it's almost a 0 byte transaction, it's a very, very small transaction, the size of the transaction makes almost no difference in the web world. It really is about the number of connections.
Number of round trips.
So if you have round trips, thank you.
Yep.
So if you have 70 objects that it has to go to this change, to this change, to this change, that's a huge problem,
Yes.
right? So that issue is exactly what you're talking about, where it's one thing to get the content close to the user. That's awesome. It's then even better to tell the user, now stop asking me. We will tell you when it's changed, right?
Yeah, Web Accelerator is actually a subject really near and dear to my heart. A lot of the features that came in the later versions are features that, as a customer, I requested. Things like image optimization and stuff like that. It's all about reducing the size of the transaction that goes out initially, and then keeping as much of that transaction local to the user as possible, so that when they request the content, most of it is already there for them. And then being able to manage it so that if the content gets updated, that you change the object name in the transaction so that it requests new content.
That's right. And by there for them, you mean on the user's system.
On the user's
not,
system.
Not on the
Not
local
at a
cache.
CDN.
You mean...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let me plug one thing here.
Because that eliminates round trips, and round trips are the enemy, right?
Exactly. Let me plug one thing here, and it's not going to be DevCentral forums this time.
Aww.
The Web Accelerator team actually does have a web-based tool.
Yeah.
They call it Whammer. I don't know if it's been changed yet, but they're
Probably
calling
will
it
be.
Whammer for now. Where you
Let
can
Mark
actually
get a hold of that.
you can input a public-facing URL, and it will give you a measurement of how the site performs without web acceleration and how the site performs with web acceleration. And sometimes that's very telling, right? So I'd encourage people to look at that.
So that probably was way more than we need to talk about WA, but we all obviously know and love WA. So, okay, next question from Dennis. If my iRules... Somebody said iRules. If my iRules are used to load balance traffic to different pools, which are on different VLANs, and F5 has a leg on those, but on the virtual server I can't use a snap pool, I have to use AutoMap, as it allows to jump to different VLANs. What if I need more snap pool members and AutoMap isn't enough?
When you're selecting the pool,
I am
also
thoroughly
select the
confused.
snap pool. His question is, he's got AutoMap configured, and so when he's selecting a pool, and the pools are on different VLANs, so obviously different emerging addresses. All he has to do is, if he selects pool A at the same time, select a snap pool that
Which the
happens
IRL
to
will
be
also
on that
do.
particular
Yeah,
VLAN.
so-
the
right,
VLAN can it can do it
Go
at
ahead.
that point.
Yeah, so the iRule will do. iRules do a lot of things, but it'll do a lot more than just choosing the pool. If you are going to choose the pool, make sure you're going to the right SNAT along with that pool.
That's correct.
So in your iRule, rather than having one action for whatever logic you're using, have two actions, which is pool whatever, SNAT pool whatever, right? Which would solve that problem very quickly. Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. Next question from Jim Jones. Do you support Speedy Protocol, which was recently approved in the HTTP 2.0 spec?
Yeah,
My goodness, what a wonderful question. That's like a
He
swing.
also-
It's like
he was-
T-ball, like
yeah.
just waiting to swing.
And he asked the question about web accelerators, so
Yes.
it shows me that he's got a site he's concerned about the performance of.
And or is using or looking at using Web Accelerator, which works out very well for him in this case.
Exactly. F5 LTM was the very first product to support Speedy in a gateway scenario.
Yep.
The very first. And the support is very sophisticated.
So the answer is yes, we absolutely do. So we act as a Speedy gateway so that we can talk Speedy on the front end. So you can talk to your users in Speedy and your servers in HTTP 1.1.1, whatever, so that they don't have to understand things, and we do, right? Just like SSL offloading, it's the exact same concept.
It's a great way to retrofit Speedy to IIS servers.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, no change to the servers at all. If you want to take 1,000 legacy servers and make them faster, turn that on. One thing to note, though, is that this was introduced in later versions of 11. So
11.1, right? 11.2?
Correct. 11.2.
Yeah.
And so if you're using that or later, you may need to get what we call an early access license because it's not shown in the GUI. And this basically means that you acknowledge that this is a brand new capability and brand new. When we first introduced this, Speedy was not a ratified spec yet.
Right.
So because of that, we knew that it's going to be changing. Therefore, what we're doing is going to be changing. So you have to get that license there. That basically you're just acknowledging, saying, hey, I know that this is going to be changing.
Yeah, you are acknowledging that we don't know where the dust is going to settle yet because they haven't told us, right? Yeah. So it works, but we are basically just reserving the right to change things as the protocol changes, which you want us to do anyway, but it's a legal thing, right? So, Okay, next question from Barry. Can you talk about your SDN capabilities? I'm sure we can. Who wants to talk about SDN capabilities? No?
Sure.
Anybody?
So software-defined networking, or SDN, there's a lot of pieces in motion. There are so many pieces in motion on this.
And it's a relatively new concept and stuff too, right?
It's a new concept, and there's a lot of different competing specs and such that we're following, that we're staying abreast of. So some of the things is F5 is adding support for things like NVGRE, VXLAN, and these are really important components for us to play a role in this. We're also looking forward to the Grizzly release within OpenStack.
Yeah.
So that's coming out pretty shortly here in the new year. So that's going to be where you'll see a lot more heavy integration, and F5 pushing a lot more heavily into some of the cloud-based SDN capabilities.
And it's an interesting question. I just got back from, a couple weeks ago now, got back from a developers conference, actually, not a networking thing, a development thing, where I was talking to some core developers around Tickle and that kind of stuff. And this was, they hadn't really heard of F5 before, they didn't know what we did, so I gave the spiel about what we did and how it works and all that noise. And this was one of the first things they started asking, because as developers, they think SDN's, it's the coolest thing since sliced bread, right? Because that's where their brains are. And they said, well, wouldn't that be a problem for you? Isn't that going to eat into your market? And I kind of said, well, no, just the opposite. Frankly, we think it's a good thing for us. We think that it plays to our strengths, absolutely, and it's a very powerful thing because we can understand what's happening, right? We are able to actually understand and interpret what's happening at this layer where a lot of other networking devices really, really can't play, right?
Right.
So
F5 has always been the bridge between the network and the application.
Yeah.
So the network becoming more dynamic,
It's good
that's
for us.
great.
It's
The
just
application's been
a beautiful
dynamic.
thing.
It's about time
Yeah.
that the network becomes dynamic.
Yeah.
So that's I think that's a great thing. I think that really will show off a lot of F5's capabilities.
Yeah, think of it like for years we have had to take simple networking and translate to complex, which is application, and we're good at that, and back and forth. And they're saying, well, isn't a problem, you have to deal with this complex network. And we're like, well, but no, we speak complex over here. We had to downplay it to simple on the network side. If that turns into complex too, well, awesome, we're good at that too, right? It's just passing information back and forth, and we understand the application well enough that won't be a problem at all. I think it's going to be good for us personally.
Yep.
That's not an F5 opinion, that's a Colin opinion. Next question. Can the conversion scripts create iRules automatically in order to maintain the same traffic management as done with ACE? Man, that would be really, really cool.
I think not.
Yeah, the answer to that is no. iRules are one of those things that you kind of do yourself, right? It takes, do yourself or download, right? It takes some scripting to know how to do those sorts of things. And if there's a very defined function that needs an iRule to be accomplished, that we could do. Yeah. We could say, hey, this needs this functionality, and create it.
Most traffic management that's done with ACE, though, doesn't really require any iRule.
That's exactly it.
It's essentially just translating a config object on one side to a config object on another.
And the script does that.
Granted, there are some special cases that you probably would want to cover, but by and large, the conversion script doesn't really need iRules.
Right.
iRules come into play when you're doing something very exotic with traffic management.
Yeah, keep in mind. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if there's like simple redirection and stuff like that you're doing, I don't think the script handles that scenario as is, but that iRule is going to be very, very simple. Mm-hmm. And so you post your source codes, sanitized into either the forum specific for this event or in the iRules forum, and we'll take care of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a good point. Again, I talk about iRules all the time. One of the questions we get asked is, well, does that mean that I have to write all this code to make my your product work? No, not at all. That's a good point you're kind of making from another angle, which is apples to apples. We have, as many or more features as all of the competitors, especially that particular one. So anything that they're doing as far as a configuration object, it's an infinitesimal chance that we would need an iRule to actually solve that problem. Our configurations are very, very capable of handling all of those objects. Yeah. If there is something you want to do particular in iRules, that's not going to be scripted. You have to do it yourself, or I get to the forums and get some help and ask for that kind of stuff.
And most simple redirections handled in an HTTP class now. So.
Absolutely. Are there more questions? Are we add questions at that point? I think all ones I have listed on the display. Okay, so I think we are out of questions at this point, unless somebody wants to dump someone in the chat. So any final thoughts, folks? I asked you earlier, right? If there's one thing you have to tell them, what is it? So at this point, it's, once we've seen the questions, and any thoughts to leave them with as far as trying to migrate to F5 technology, whether it's, a question that I asked today, or where to go from here, or whatever, right?
I would say just, to build on Nathan's point earlier, take the time to pause and understand your application and understand where you want your application to be rather than how you've been limited in your platform previously. Because there's always an opportunity to improve. Even once you're on our gear, as we have new versions and we introduce new features, it makes sense to go back and evaluate, how have I built this? Does it make sense to come back and pull things out of iRules that are now checkboxes? So it's always good when you're making a change of any kind to take a pause and evaluate where you are and where you can be.
Right. And speaking to that, as we introduce new features, it opens up opportunities for you at the gateway level that maybe you weren't thinking about before. Like, for example, with APM, we're going to be introducing support for SAML, but not only to be a SAML endpoint, but also to generate SAML assertions going out. So we could do things like retrofit existing legacy applications to do SAML that don't natively understand
Which
SAML.
is a big deal.
It's a huge deal.
Yeah.
Right. And it becomes a possibility that, okay, you start with a load balancing architecture and you end up with something
Way different.
that can do a lot more than you thought.
Yeah. And that's, we talked several times, right? Don't try and compare where you're at today to the new device if you're moving, right? You need to plan on using more features because they're going to exist, right?
Yeah, so if you're migrating from a NetScaler or a Cisco, something like that, you could be using our scripts. That's great. That'll take you so far, and the scripts work for NetScaler, for CSM, for ACE, etc. Great, that'll take you this far. But certainly pause, and take a look at how else could I expand? How else could I make my application be faster? How can I simplify my network design? All of these things are options. Take the time. It's worth a look, and that's something that we have a whole team of field engineers that's their job, is to help you do just that.
Absolutely. There's a question that I ask oftentimes when I'm talking to customers or whatever it is out in the field, because I do go in the field sometimes, is people are saying, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that, how does it work? They're so far down the road already saying, I'm starting here and I need to get over here. And I pull back and say, well, wait, you just think you need to get there. Where is it you're actually trying to, where's your end destination, right? It might not be you're at point A trying to get to point B. Your end destination might not be point B. You're just convinced you need to get there first. When the reality is oftentimes you can pull back and say, wait, how can we do this differently, right? You can think about it differently with the different functionality that exists and those kinds of things, and actually get where you're going differently, faster, whatever, that kind of thing, right? For me, if I were going to share kind of a final thought, and this is an absolute plug, and I apologize for that, but not really, go to DevCentral. I mean, if you're looking at F5 technology at all, honestly, if you're a technology type person, if you're an engineer, you really should get out to DevCentral. I know that I'm biased because I've been at DevCentral for 8 years now, but you really should be out there looking. There's all kinds of solutions about what can be done, whether it's the scripting stuff, iControl, iRules, IAPS, all that stuff, or advanced Zenit config, or monitoring and management, all that kind of stuff. You really should get out there. It's easy and free to sign up. You can get involved in the forums and talk to 105,000 plus people that are using this stuff day in and day out, and it's a great resource. You really should be involved.
Give your sales engineers and your solution architects a call. They're in the trenches every day, and they're fabulous resources. They are rock stars. They know everything, and so it's a great resource. Be a consumer. Go out, read. There's, as Colin was saying, there's all kinds of solutions out there on DevCentral that just, for me, even writing it's mind blowing sometimes.
Yeah.
What you showed me yesterday that we can't talk about was mind blowing.
Yes.
And so
that thing at that place with the
there's just an amazing array of solutions that you would think that's not possible, and it is. And
awesome. Cool. Well, there's some more questions coming in. We're just about out of time anyway, and we're wrapping up here. So I think what we're going to do is take these questions and we'll put them in the forum and get to them there rather than try and fire through more questions. So I asked for more questions. You did me proud and came up with a dozen more questions, which is awesome. But now we're almost out of time, so I apologize for that. But let's take those again in the forums. But for now, thank you very much, everybody, for the time. Really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody that spent the time with us. I mean, that's awesome to get here and interact with the community and get to answer those questions and talk to people. So thanks for the time. And thanks again for all the folks behind the scenes making this work, for the folks that are running the technology and in the chat, of course, and that kind of thing. Thanks a ton. We will be doing these things consistently. We do them every, whatever it is, 4 to 8 weeks, somewhere in there. So come back and see more. And in the meantime, get out there and check out some cool F5 stuff. So thanks very much. We will see you soon.